right, everyone. Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 7 in the discourse Tzion b'mishpat Tipadeh, which is the 11th discourse, Mishasha Ekdimu 5672. And you know, for those who listen to my other classes, how I like the number 711. So this is a special class. Okay. Now, we are holding over here again. I think this is going to be the 5th class. And so last week we were learning, he was explaining in the last bunch of classes the idea that how the experience of Chachma is a complete different type of an experience than Bina. The understanding of Chachma, of wisdom, is a phenomenally different experience than Bina, and Bina never chews on the essence of Chachma. Generally, Bina chews from Chachma. It takes a piece of Chachma and it chews it until it digests it, it develops it, it eats it. But what we're learning over here is that there's the essence of the Chachma experience always remains elusive from the Bina. The Bina cannot crunch it, because what carries over from the Chachma to the Bina is only, in the words of the Rabbi Rashab, of the author, is that it only what transmits from Chachma to Bina is only the sichli of the Chachma. The sichli of the Chachma means, call it the logic, call it the intellectual element of the Chachma, which is the external crust, where Chachma is trying to find some way of passing it forward into Bina. It kind of already is leaning into the realm of intelligence. But the essence of the Chachma is similar to a vision. The higher part of Chachma is a pure re'iyah, it's a part with the eyes. And then even on the lower levels of Chachma, where it is not, it doesn't constitute a re'iyah, a vision. It's not as crisp, as clear as seeing, but it's still a revelation of that truth to the soul, as it is, not necessarily with the understanding of it, but rather it is laying itself down. It is entering the space of the soul and making it within the soul. On a higher level, it is as bright as seeing it. When you're seeing something, you're taking that truth into yourself. Over here, it's not as bright as that, but it still has the same powerful conviction, because it has entered into your space as it is. Then, as that happens, the mind kind of creates some kind of an external appreciation of it that is called logic or understanding. It's not understanding yet, but call it like the sichli. It has already realms of seichel. That element of it is completely the chitzonius of it, the external part of it. That is what passes on to the Bina. And that's where Bina takes the Nakuda, the point. But again, even the sichli of the Chachma is still only one point. It's taking it's summarizing what it has received into an intellectual point. That intellectual point is the chitzonius of it. That is what carries over to Bina. And as we learned earlier, that is called ayin to Chachma. That's called nothing to the Chachma experience. So on this level, Chachma is called the real yesh, and the Bina is called ayin, nothing. And that's why the relationship of Chachma and Bina is one of yesh me'ayin. And the Bina, what Bina is experiencing, is like a total new reality to Chachma, to the internal element of Chachma. So therefore you can look, because the Chachma is nothingness, the Bina doesn't grasp it at all. The real experience of Chachma remains elusive, hidden, and nothing to Bina. And Bina is like a yesh, like a whole new reality, a whole new substance, which is not an evolution of Chachma, but it's something totally new. Okay. Last thing we were learning, and that's the reason why he says in the last point that Chachma is called Kodesh, because Kodesh means separated. And he says when you say something is separated from something else, it means that superficially, externally, it looks like it's the same, but you're saying one is separated from the other. That's why you can't say on a human and an animal that the human is separated from the animal, because no one would even equate the two. They're complete two different species and two different types it's not only two species, because two species you can have in the animal kingdom as well. Not just you have millions or thousands of them. But over here we're talking, it's a whole elevated, to say the human is separated from the animal. And even amongst human itself, like in special in terms of their wisdom, that would mean that you're equating them amongst other intellectuals and the other wise men, and you say this person is outstanding. But if you have a person who's a genius of geniuses, you wouldn't say that he's separated from ignoramus people, from boorish people who have no relationship to any kind of intellectual refinement of the mind, because of course there's nothing to talk about. So when we say Chachma is separated from Bina, it's Kodesh. The word Kodesh means holy, and holy means separated. Is that there is, one can see Chachma as very much mingling with Bina. It's like one continuum. From Chachma comes Bina. There's a point, and the point becomes stretched out, becomes elaborated in the Bina. But that's the emphasis. It looks like it is that way, but it's not that way, because the real soul of the Chachma, the true experience of Chachma, ends in Chachma and never goes over to Bina. It stops in Chachma, and that's it. And that's why it's called Kodesh, because it's separated. That was the last thing we learned in the last class. And now we're going to finish over here. V'gam, we're holding by the word V'gam. He's going to give now another thought why Chachma is called Kodesh, separated. It's related to this idea, but it is looking at it from a different angle. The explanation of why the Chachma is called Kodesh is not in relationship to the Bina, where in other words, that Chachma is a whole different experience than Bina is. And then Bina and all the rest of the divine attributes, or in the human being, all the rest of a person's powers of their soul, is that they all, from Bina and onward, it's only the about it, like we discussed earlier. It's only the information of the Orin Sof. It doesn't experience the mahus, the substance of the Orin Sof. And Chachma experiences the substance of it. That's what we learned. That's what we learned in with a Chachma, that it is a level that the Chachma is separated from the person that is beholding it. Now, within ourselves, when we have a Chachma epiphany, our vessels are not grasping it, and therefore we can never unify with it. When you have a Chachma experience, it remains above and beyond you. When you have a Bina experience, you're assimilating it and becoming one with it. So once something enters the Bina stage, the experience of Bina makes that experience whatever. Let's say if I'm getting to know you on a level of Bina, then I am now attached to you fully. But if I only know you in a level of Chachma, although it's a higher form of knowledge, but there's a certain distance, because the Chachma, the entire Chachma experience remains above my vessel. That's kind of the idea that he's going to explain now. So earlier we were talking about that Chachma is, and here he's explaining how we're in as much your body, cells, your kalim, which is your limited self, not your higher, deeper neshama self, but your limited human self, that is a human being, which means someone who has his soul embedded in kalim, in vessels. So we're saying an experience of Bina means when you learn the passage of Talmud and you really process it through your Bina, you and that page of Talmud has become one. Of course, the external page of the page of the Talmud, which is what is processable in the Bina, but that which of the passage of the Talmud you have you are processing, you meaning the vessels of the person is totally one with it. But when you studied the Talmud and you had a chachma and you didn't process it in your bina, you only illuminating it as powerful. There's so much light, but you as a human being separated from that, just processed only in your chachma because it hasn't yet entered your vessels and it hasn't assimilated. And the essence of chachma, as we said earlier, even though the sichli of chachma, the nakuda, the point you might say is already somewhat not kodesh, not holy. It's already descending into your consciousness in a way that you're holding on to it. But the real inner element of that chachma, which is the inlay of that experience into your being, that remains. Okay, so let's read it inside. And also said of Havdalah means it is moved on. I can't grasp it. It is distance. It is elusive. So the idea of Asago is Arvus Adavar, the matter that you're comprehending, that you're apprehending, is becoming mixed. And you become totally one with it. And that is because that in the state of being, it becomes enclosed in you. Bina-sizing something, whenever we are experiencing a Bina integration with something, of course, it's only the external element of it. It's the mitzias of it. It's the about it of it. But that which you are grasping, you're fully grasping. That's the point. In other words, let's imagine I'm saying a very silly example. I cannot eat the entire cake. I can't. It's too big of a cake. I can never eat the cake. But the small crumb that I am eating, that crumb I'm totally eating. That's becoming blood. It's becoming, okay? So that's the kind of what we're saying over here. Yes, Bina is always only a little nugget. The Bina of something is always small because it's external compared to, especially when you're dealing with real deep ideas. So the Bina is only nibbling on the outside. But that which it is nibbling on becomes completely assimilated in the nibbler, in the person that is taking it in. The matter becomes it becomes enclosed with tfisa mamish, and it becomes literally grasped bikelim in the vessels. It becomes an internal light. So this means it became unified, literally became completely one with you. But anything that is separated from the context of grasping, that's called separated. And what is that? That's the radiance of the idea that is not grasped and is not apprehended or comprehended at all. But it doesn't mean you have no relationship to it. It is shining into you, like the Chachma experience. Something is shining into the person. I know it. I actually either can see it or can receive it, but I'm not latching onto it because my vessels can't grasp it. It is illuminating above from one's intelligence, ubinasa and understanding. And this is the idea that we say, this is um, captured this uncapturable idea. This uncapturable idea is actually captured in a halacha. What's the halacha? The halacha is in regards to the impure, such as a liquid. The liquid becomes impure. Now, what happens if you're touching water and you pour wine in the water? So the wine and the water mix, of course. So the wine also becomes impure because it mixed with the water. So what happens if the oil rises to the top? It doesn't mix. So then it becomes a whole different situation regarding a Tvul Yaim was someone whose impurity is very weak. It's a person who went to the mikveh already. It's just that they have to wait till the evening until their impurity will go away from them completely. Till sunset, and then their impurity disappears. Okay, these are complicated. These are laws, intricate laws, which we're not going to get into right now. But this level of impurity is a very weak level of impurity. So regarding a Tvul Yaim, if they touch water and then there is oil floating on the water, we're saying over here, according to the, even though it's floating on because it doesn't mix. Shemen, the oil shetzaf al gabi yayin, or that it's over here. It's not oil and water. It's oil that floats on top of wine. But I think it would apply the same thing to water as well. The Perek Beis in the second chapter, the Tvul Yaim of the tractate Tvul Yaim, Mishnah Hey, the fifth Mishnah. The Rabbanan Tzvilale, the rabbis hold she'eino chibur, that it's not considered an attachment. So we know that every law has a deeper, godlier, mystical meaning than the practical law. The practical law is only a physical manifestation of some deep godly concept. So we know always that wine is considered bina. Bina is called wine, and oil is chachma. From this law, we see that the oil remains separated from the wine. That the bina never touches the chachma. The real essence of the chachma remains aloof from the bina. That's the reason why when the wine gets contaminated, it does not contaminate the oil, because the oil, it's as if they're not touching. The oil is like separated from it completely. It's not an attachment. Yayin is bina's understanding, which we said earlier. Bina shuhumar karlish talshalos. That's considered the source. From the bina begins the entire evolution of worlds, of all spheros. Masha, in a way of ilav ul, of cause and effect. Mashenki. So the wine, for example, so the bina does mix into the emotions, because the emotions, the relationship of bina with the emotions is cause and effect. So they have like a chain. Remember, we spoke like a chain with a link. One link is linked into the space of the other, so they have a grasp one on each other. But the chachma and the bina, the chachma remain separated. Shemen shu makar l'shtas, mashenki shemen, which is not the case with the oil. Shu b'chenes chachma, which is the chachma, which remains aloof. But he says in the parentheses, but we have to realize that's not the sichli of the chachma. The sichli of the chachma, which we spoke earlier, the logical, the outer crust of the chachma, the intellectual point, the nekuda haskala that he called it, that Bina grasps that and Bina crunches on that and eats that. That's the lower part of the chachma. That's not the oil of the chachma. That is the considered the water. Chachma sometimes is compared to water, and sometimes it's compared to oil. The water of chachma, water flows down. That's the outer element, the chitzonius of the chachma. The external part of the chachma, essence of the chachma, is the oil element of chachma that doesn't mix. This is the higher level. This is the higher level of chachma. It is above this that chachma is called sichli sheba chachma, like the sichli of the chachma, which is the water of the chachma, the intellectual element of chachma. The external part of it, the shemen, but the oil, yesh leimar, we can say shezau b'chenas oir shalamayla mamayim. That is considered light. That's higher than water. Are both associated with chachma, oil and water. We also know that the evolution of water is explained in in Hasidus, I think it comes from originally in Sefer Yetzirah, in the Book of Formation. There's a concept called Or Mayim Rak. So firmament is the lowest level. That symbolizes Bina, because the firmament is congealed water. So that's the Bina. With something becomes already fixed, congealed, it has limitations and boundaries, you can grasp it. Chachma is called water because it's still fluidy, but the water of Chachma, we know, becomes what that itself becomes congealed in the rakia, in the firmament. So the water flows into the bina, and it becomes congealed. So the mayim and the rakia have a deep connection with each other. But the oil element of chachma, that's a higher level. That's the chachma, when the chachma is not even water, it's pure light. So it works like this, but it's light, and light has no connection to the rakia, to the firmament. Light is utterly abstract and ungraspable. And we know, and that's the level that he says is shemen. What would be the relationship between shemen and light? I think it's very simple, because we create light through shemen. Shemen is the substance that we light a candle with, that we light an oil, a light, we create light. So that would probably be the connection. But in any case, this is parenthetical over here, so we're not get too fakratz in understanding it. But the general idea over here is that there are different symbolisms or different characterizations, but that are associated with these levels that we're talking about. And what he's doing right now is just aligning them, that one should align with. There's a level called Shem. Or let's put it this way: there is oil-fledged taste into a person. You taste it, you enjoy it, it's fully acidic, right? Water is like tasteless because it's still chachma. Chachma is still a state above the full grasp and understanding, and therefore it's above taste. And that's even the lower level of chachma, which is more like the beginning of essence of the chachma, which is the essence, which is the shemen, the oil. Sira, which is light, water, and firmament. So firmament will be aligned with wine, something that is more graspable. It actually says that the firmament is made out of kerach, out of ice. What's ice? Ice is when you take water that's fluid and you freeze it, and it becomes a solid, so you make an ice cube out of it. So when it was water, you couldn't grasp it. Try to grasp the water in your hand. It will flow, go everywhere, unless you put it in a cup. If it freezes and becomes ice, oh yeah, you can take that piece of water and hold it, and it's not spilling everywhere. So the ice represents the bina level, where things are already formed in form. The lower level of chachma, the chachma that is extending into bina, that's the water of the chachma, which we discussed earlier, is called oil, is also in this order called light, or mayim rakia. Okay, so now we continue. Masha enkin shemen shu b'chenas chachma, which isn't the case of the oil that is called chachma. She'enay misarev mabina, does not mix with the bina, remains always above the bina. But Amaz, now to support this, he brings a teaching from one of the great Kabbalists who was a commentary on the Zohar, Ramoshas Emer, Pirish on the Zohar. It's Kasab Sham Lakuti Torah Marizal. He beard of God, Beis B'chinais. We'll see in a moment where he's going out over here. But in the concept called the beard of the keter of the crown, it says there's two levels. Echad b'chenas Osiris, One is the hair. The Sham Bina derives, that's where Bina is rooted. Bina is rooted in the beard, but in the hair itself of the beard. Bays, and the second level is Oir HaPnimi, the internal light, Sheyesh B'Toicham, which is inside, Hu B'china Shemen HaToiv, and this is the good oil. V'Metzias Abba, and this is the existence of Father. What does that mean? Here we're going a little bit higher. We're going into the source of Chachma Bina, not even Chachma Bina, but Chachma Bina in their source, how they are coming about from the Keter, from the crown. So it says that the Chachma Bina deriving, Keser is a quantum leap, and God can only deliver that, make that quantum leap, can only. He chooses a channel called hair. Just like in a human being, the energy of a person's brain spreads all over the body. And if you lives in a very real, that soul is the energy of the soul is entering into hair. What's that? It's a tiny, tiny fraction of a life in the hair. Hair are alive because they grow, but on the other hand, doesn't hurt. You can cut your hair; it doesn't hurt anything. It's as if you couldn't care less. It doesn't make a difference to the person waking up in the morning if you lost a hair or you lost 20 hair at night when you're sleeping or in the shower. It's insignificant because it's nothing of you. And this is symbolic to the idea that the entire flow of energy that flows into the Esosphirot from above is considered nothing of the Erech, the hair of the Ket of Keser. And it says that there's, and he says like this, Bina is deriving her existence from the hair itself, from the tube itself. What's a hair? A hair is a thin tube. So Bina takes its existence from the hair itself. Chachma receives its existence from the internal light that's flowing in the hair, from the chayas itself. That's the hair. That's the oil that's in the hair. What does that mean? There's a pasuk that says, Keshemen Hatov in Psalms, one of the Shir Hamalos is 133 or something like that. I'm not sure. But it says in Psalms, how good and how wonderful Sheves Achim, when people brothers sit together, and it says Keshemen Hatov, like the good oil, Yored Ala Zakan, that goes down on the beard, Zakana Haron, the beard of Aaron, Sheyored Al Pimedosov, that goes down onto his emotions. Not going to get into the whole meaning of all of this. However, you see that there's a dripping of oil over the hair or in the hair. So this idea that he's saying over here means like this, as it applies to us, to our discussion. The external part of the hair, that's the Bina. And the internal part of the hair is the oil. And that's Chachma. So this further brings forth this idea that oil doesn't mix with anything. Oil remains aloof. Chachma is the oil. The real essence of Chachma is oil. And it's utterly separated from the Bina experience. Look what we will explain later in chapter 204. We're going to get there in quite a while. From all this, it's understood. Move on. Based on all this that we discussed, we can now say that Chachma is not just a generality compared to Bina, and therefore Chachma has more light and Bina has less light because Bina is dissecting the details, and once you get into the details, you don't have any. It contains the entire idea and a point. You have more energy there. That's not just that. Chachma is not just a general point for Bina. Chachma has what Bina will never get. And that's what he's saying over here. Chachma, therefore, is Maila. It is an essential. This is concluding the idea that he was developing in the last three chapters, that Chachma is essentially a higher level than Bina, Lagaba Bina. It's not just that in Chachma there is more light. It's essentially higher. Compared to Bina, her level is essentially above. Hashem, tomorrow, on the next class, we're going to continue in chapter 43, which puts us halfway through, I think, halfway through this discourse. Kitzer, let's do the summary. In truth, kama sichli de chachma, even the seichel of chachma, he anacha sichli is even the lower part of chachma, because how are we saying that chachma is utterly above bina? He says no. Because even the seichel of chachma, it's grasping the essence, which is higher than grasping. Of course, he says in parentheses, it's not the crisp, clear, sharp experience of vision, because that not everybody experiences. That's a higher level of chachma. But even in the lower level of chachma, it still is a space in where the concept is able to enter in and be as it is in the person, not an interpretation of the idea, but the idea itself. Not a description, but the idea itself. And the beginning of the description of it, which is already the sichli, the logic of it, huchitzaini is only the external part of this experience. And that's the reason that what settles into the nekudas haskala in the point, sometimes we discussed earlier that you can have this experience, you feel so good that you've gotten the understanding, but when you try to explain it even to yourself, you don't have the words to explain it, and it still doesn't feel right. And then there are sometimes things that are so wondrous that can never move past chachma. You don't, that they remain in chachma. That's why he brought the idea that there are wise people that have such deep understanding in things that they have chachma experiences, but they can never explain it. Sometimes there are things that are accepted in the minds of intellectuals, but they even if they can't explain it rationally with full scientific proof. However, this powerful inlay of an idea into your mind adds more strength to the intellectual experience as well. Therefore, he recommends that when you get stuck in a situation like this, when you had the clarity in the chachma, but when you're trying to explain it, it's not making sense. He says, try to go back to that clarity, go back into that illumination, and then try again to process, because now the seichel got more infusion, got more strength, and the seichel itself hopefully will open up for the person as well. This that bina always grasps is only the seichel of it. But that inlay, this is the nothingness, which tabina is called nothing, which is never grasped, but it does add oomph. And this is what we also learned, that chachma is considered the higher das. The true existence of God is able to shine in chachma, the essence. But that which later passes on into grasping, hua'ara, is only a ray of it, the kalachashiv, which is considered nothing to chachma. What chachma passes on to bina is only a ray of chachma, which is considered nothing to chachma, because it's not even a percentage of what chachma has. It's like an external outer ray that doesn't have any of the substance of chachma. That's why it's called holy. Even the lower level of chachma is essentially higher than grasping. And it doesn't mix with the levels below it. Like oil that floats above the water. But elsewhere, see, this is something that he didn't mention in the Maimer, but he mentions it over here. On the one hand, we say oil doesn't mix with anything. But the other hand, we say that oil gets into everything. When you pour oil into something, it gets into everything. So it's two opposite qualities. Is present everywhere. It's in its aloofness. So that the Einoi Mis'ariv, it's everywhere, but it doesn't mix. That's why we say there's no one as holy as Havaya. Why? They are holy, means they're separated, means that they remain completely disconnected from whatever they're separated from. But the real cool thing about Havaya is Chachma goes to the lowest things. Concludes chapter 42. Mazel Tov, and Be'ezus Hashem, we continue on chapter 43 in the next class.